All right. Hi, folks. Steven here. So, this is going to be another one of our discussions about the music of a Pokemon side game. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the music of Pokemon Ranger Shadows of Almia. This is the second of the DS Ranger games in the Ranger side series. So, we're midway through that, I suppose. And why don't you introduce yourself? Let folks know what you've been working on while we wait for some folks before we start the actual discussion. But why don't you go ahead, Anne?
My name is Anne. I run Pikapi Podcast, the sporadically updated Pokemon anime podcast, going through every episode of the Pokemon anime from start to finish. So we're currently in the middle of Hoenn. We've got a long road ahead of us, but slowly but steadily, I'm working through it.
Yeah, as far as stuff here, let's see. Well, there was Go Community Day a couple weeks ago, and then next month it's a little bit of a weird situation because of the sort of limited weird space constraints. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. I may have just Worlds is next month, and I don't have a spectator pass, so let's just put it that way. So that's a whole to do there. But I will be attending the area or the event or the whatever. So we'll see how that all goes. So that's going to obviously throw a bit of a wrench in getting some of this stuff out, but I will be continuing to work on there and expect to have some sort of event report once that's done after the event. So, yeah, but tonight it's going to be Pokemon Ranger, Shadows of Almia, and the music discussion thereof. We did discuss, I think last year we talked about the first Pokemon Ranger game, which is actually a very late Gen 3 game despite being on the DS. There were at least 2 or 3 DS games that came out before the mainline series DS games came out. That's not totally unusual nowadays, of course. We see that pretty much all the time. Where like the first thing on a new platform will be some sort of side Pokemon spin-off type thing. But in any case, this is a full-on Gen 4 game. So we'll be starting our discussion momentarily. If you have any comments, you can always type those in the chat, and we'll try and incorporate those into our discussion. We also have a little bit of feedback to go over. And we'll sort of take things from there. So one second, I got to get some stuff booted up before we can really start here. Okay, let's see. There's the switch there. But as usual, we're going to go through our usual process. We have some background info on the game. We have sort of the some songs picked out. Then we do sort of an overall thing, and then we record at the very end. We record a game discussion. So that's the usual structure, and we're kind of sticking to that. All right. Okay, Anne, are you ready to get started?
I am.
Okay. So we'll leave a little bit of a pause like we usually do, and then I will do an introduction. Hi folks, Steven here. I'm on the phone with Anne from Pikapi Podcast, and in our continuing series of Pokemon side game music discussions, we've made it to Pokemon Ranger Shadows of Almia for the DS. So this is the second of the 3 DS Ranger games. Let's see. And, sorry, I'm not sure. I always somewhere in the intro. This just happens, folks. Hi, folks. Steven here. I'm on the phone with Anne from Pikapi Podcast. And in our continuing series of Pokemon side game music discussions, we've reached Pokemon Ranger Shadows of Almia for the DS. So this is the middle of the 3 Pokemon Ranger games. Now, the first one was a Gen 3, very late Gen 3 side game. This is actually a full-on Gen 4 side game. And, they changed a lot of stuff mechanically, and, sorry. So, and although this, what's the word I'm looking for? Not iteration, it's something with an IN, not instance, installment, that's the word. And although this And although this installment is mostly known for changing a fair number of mechanical things from the first game, it does have its own soundtrack for the most part, and we're going to be talking about that. All right, well, first we like to do a little bit of background info. This game was released in 2008. If you were in Japan, it came out in March of that year. If you were in North America, Europe, or Australia, it actually came out in November. Different weeks, but all three of those regions got the game sometime in November of 2008. And just a quick little reminder, this game is available... And just a quick little reminder, this game is available on the Wii U Virtual Console. And just a little reminder, this game is available on the Wii U Virtual Console, although it's getting progressively more difficult to put credit on there and buy things. In fact, by the time this makes it to the podcast feed, there's a very good chance that it'll be nearly, if not totally, impossible to do that, unfortunately. But you can always try to pick up a used copy as well. Let's see, as far as the original experience with this game, I kind of initially had no interest until I found out that they had really changed the capture mechanics to be a lot less, I guess you could say, repetitive and difficult as they were, or as a lot of folks, including myself, found them to be in the first Ranger game. Once I found that out, I was much more interested and ended up picking this up. Now, Anne, you never completed the first Ranger game, and technically neither did I when it originally came out. Is that basically why you didn't pick up this game when it originally released?
Mostly, yeah. Like having not played the first game, it just really wasn't on my radar. But I have picked up this game now, since it was showered with such high praise.
Well, Anne, I think you said I think I might need you to restate that, because you said you had played the first one, you just never finished it, right? Or had you...
like I played bits of it. Okay. Like, I've never owned it. And so, like, again, I just, like, the little bits I played were kind of hard to play. So it's kind of okay. Just, fell by the wayside. Okay. And then the second one.
Okay. Let me rephrase that question, then I'll reprompt you.
Okay.
Now, Anne, if I recall correctly, you did play at least some of the first game, but that didn't carry you over and get you interested in the second one. What exactly happened there back in the day?
Yeah, like, I'm trying to remember back. This is not a game that made a huge impression on me. But, like, I believe I've played bits and pieces of it, but maybe found the gameplay difficult and just never really, got into that game. And so when the second one came out, it just wasn't even on my radar until now, when I have played a little bit of it.
Yeah, you did end up picking up a copy for this sort of replay or sorry. You did end up picking up a copy for this retrospective that we're doing right now, and we certainly appreciate that, especially given the typical resale value of used Pokemon games, especially in the last few years. But as far as me, like I said, I did pick this up. I played all the way through it. I also played all the way through it on the Wii U Virtual Console. So to me, this is almost kind of like the first game in the Pokémon Ranger series, sort of setting the first one aside as sort of a, well, that was a nice try. We'll talk more about sort of the gameplay changes in our actual gameplay discussion at the very end, but this one made much more of an impression on me, much more positive impression, I would say, overall. But as far as the music, it probably won't surprise you too much that this game has, that the two people who worked on the first game also worked on this one. But there is actually a new name there. Just to review, let's go over the people who are returning here. There is Takuto Kitsuda, who is kind of best known for the scrapped N64 version of Mother 3. Let's see, some e-cards. He apparently did some work on Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and the game Detective Pikachu, which we will get to at some point. And then there's Kenta Sato, Way of the Samurai 3 apparently is one of his credits. And any updates or insights on those two folks?
Nothing on Nothing on those two, no. I did look up Shinobu Amayake, and I have like a little bit on her. I don't know if it's much different than what you've been able to find on her, though.
Well, yeah. Let's talk about this new person, Shinobu Amayake. Hopefully, I got that about right. But she is she did some game music development back in the '90s. She worked on, I guess, the NES version of Wario's Woods, sort of the infamous last official NES game, as well as Stunt Race FX for the Super Nintendo. And as the name of that kind of implies, it's one of those Super FX games. You know, the first there was Star Fox. This is sort of the second main Super FX game that came out. Was a racing game that was produced there, and she did the music for it. And then eventually she kind of seems to have formed her own music company. Anne, did you have any details on that?
Yeah, so she runs AMK Music. She started that in 2006 after leaving Yamaha. And she still is, I guess, the CEO. She still presides over the company now. And I actually, she's also involved in arranging like Nintendo songs for the piano. So a lot of like Nintendo songbooks for Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon and the like are her work, her arrangement work. So that's an interesting tip. And I also like found some notes in some bios of her that she's actually living in New York. I don't know if that's still true or if that was only true for a small time in her life. But that's interesting as well.
Yeah, given the circumstances of the last few years, I wouldn't be surprised if there was another move in there. So, but yeah, definitely, it's unfortunately not clear exactly how she got pulled into this particular project. If they just needed some extra music done or wanted an extra set of ears on it or something like that, and that's how she got her credit and stuff like that, or or if she composed specific songs for it or what like that. But it is a very interesting little story. Or it is a very interesting name to sort of see there.
Yeah, given that she seems to have a lot of talent for arranging, that could be the capacity for which she was called for. But as you say, it's hard to tell.
All right, well, as far as the overall style for the music in this game, it's pretty similar to the first Ranger game, very much sort of a lot of march-type music, with brass, woodwind, stuff like that. There are a number of songs that sort of go in different directions, a few of which I think Anne and I have picked for this one. But if you, and in fact, some of the songs from the original Ranger game are more or less brought over as is, but Anne, let's see, that's not quite how I want to transition. And I assume that was sort of your overall observation as well, in terms of where the music. All right, where the music went, it doesn't sound quite right either. Give me a second to think here. Sorry, folks.
Mm-hmm. That's okay.
And did you get a similar overall impression?
Yeah, I'd say I did. Yeah, like one of the notes I have on just overall impression is that this soundtrack loves its arpeggios. But yeah, just in general, I think we're kind of on the same page with our observations. Just it's very big, it's very broad, it's very dramatic, similar but different.
Yeah, you can definitely tell the games are related musically. Not entirely surprising since they're on the same hardware and the same sub-series and whatnot, but did want to definitely point that out. All right, well, we've done what we pretty much always do here. We've each picked 3 songs. Let's see, I picked the Vienna Forest theme, the Underwater theme, and the Empoleon Ride theme. These are all, of course, unofficial titles since there's not really an official soundtrack or anything like that. But in any event, Anne, what did you pick for this one?
I picked the Chicole Village, the School at Night, and the Incredible Machine.
Yeah, you got a pretty wide swath here, I'd say. Now, as usual, we're going to try and go roughly in the order you would experience these songs in gameplay. And as a result, the first one is one of Anne's picks. And as a result, the first one is one of Anne's picks, School at Night. So, Anne, what sort of caught your attention here?
Well, it kind of reminded me of the opening to Thriller, honestly. Just the kind of undulating tone and the synths. It's just a great use of sound. Like it's got, I think they're Kodo drums, and then there's like little piano flourishes, the synthesizer, and like a shaker. It's just very useful at kind of just creeping you out and unsettling and just building to something that never quite gets resolved. And like I said, there were moments where I literally thought the da-na-na-na-na or something would start coming in from Ghostbusters or Thriller or something. So I feel like it did its job very well for a situation where you're in a school at night, and that just general sense of we're not supposed to be here, and the drama that plays out in this game sometimes, all centered around a school.
Yeah, this in the early part of the game, you're at a ranger school, which, given this is a second game in this sub-series, is kind of interesting. They have a whole school set up there, but one of the things that happened, I believe this song comes up when you're exploring kind of the basement and stuff like that, and you're running into like some ghastly or something like that. So music definitely sort of fits that scene. I put down the spooky piano and creaking boards, I think is the sound they were going for with some of that. I think you actually do have to go down to the basement for a little bit there.
Yeah, it's just a unique little track that is very specific to its location.
All right, well, after you're done with sort of the training portion of the game, you go into, I guess, sort of the main portion of go into the main story of the game. Well, let me think about how I want to say that. So after you've completed the school segment, you go into sort of the main portion of the game, and one of the first tunes you hear there is the Vienna Forest theme, which is actually a bit of a misnomer. It's used throughout the game, but I picked this. And, it plays not only in the Vienna Forest, but pretty much in anything that's not a city or a dungeon of some sort. And what I really liked about it, it does have that march brass woodwinds type feel to it, but it has a very much an off-to-adventure type of feel to it. And I assume you sort of picked up on that as well.
Yeah, and it kind of struck me just at the first in that it doesn't really kind of evoke the feeling of a forest for me. But as you say, it's kind of used in multiple capacities. And in that sense, like it's, again, the dun-da-da-da sort of quality to it. And yeah, it's got a feeling of movement, of adventure, of marching, as you said, kind of does lend it to fit a lot of different locales as you're going on your journey. It kind of, I don't know if like in terms of actual melody, like reminded me of Viridian Forest, but just in that sense of like, we're on the road to Viridian City sort of feeling of like, it's less about the actual forest that we're in and more of like the stage of our journey where we're like traveling somewhere and we're excited and we're full of newfound adventure.
Yeah, if I were picking something closer to the Viridian Forest theme, that probably would have been the song you just picked, School at Night. But
right.
You sort of mentioned all the different places. This song does have a lot of, I don't know if sections is quite the right word for it, but that's sort of the, they're not quite movements. Those would actually be bigger and longer, but it has all these different sort of pieces to it that sort of, talk about, that sort of gave me the impression of going to different places and doing things and accomplishing things and stuff like that before it, of course, loops all back around as most video game music does. Is that something that caught your attention, Anne?
Yeah, I have a note about that actually for a different song, but this is one of the songs on the track that like really has a couple different stages of its loop, which keeps it from getting too repetitive, which I think is very wise considering it gets used a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely a track. I mean, the music obviously gets interrupted whenever you encounter a Pokemon and in various other cases, but the track itself, if you have to leave it on the pause screen or whatever, it's definitely one that does not get overly annoying or boring or anything like that. You can let it play for a while without running into, at least for me, running into any, I guess you could say, problems or stuff like that.
Hmm.
All right, well, let's go on to Anne's second pick, which is Jikole Village. Anne, what made you pick this one out?
Well, this is just like a cute little song. It's a fun sort of little marimba synth, like almost a flute sound at times. It's very sweet and positive. A lot of instruments kind of in the treble register, but it also has like the occasional minor chord to just kind of like, let's not forget this is a side game and may possibly break our heart. There's still conflict in this game, but it was just such a fun and cute and like wholesome track overall that it just kind of gave me some very warm feelings towards it. A very pallet town sort of, in a sense of like, this is a safe place, I hope.
Yeah, although I'd say the one word descriptor I wrote down for this one was energetic, and it's more so than a lot of other, like if you're comparing it to stuff like Pallet Town and some of the other starting towns in various games, this one has a bit more of a step to it or pep to it or whatever, and a little more energy than I think a lot of those do. Maybe that's just because technically it's not where you start the game. That's more or less the Ranger School. But it definitely has a fair bit of energy there that I think, makes it feel actually a little less like a sleepy little town. It doesn't make it feel like a big city, but it isn't sort of the sleepy little town feel you get from where you start in a lot of the main series Pokemon games, musically speaking. So, there's one little piece I wanted to point out in sort of the main section of this song. There's one part where it goes, I don't know if it's technically a key change, but it goes into that. The main melody goes into do 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 in sort of a different register and stuff like that. I don't know if that's supposed to signal something, because or anything like that. But I assume you kind of caught that little. I don't know if you want to call that taking a risk or anything like that. But any thoughts, Anne?
I mean, I definitely noticed that. I've not played the whole game through yet, so I don't know if this comes back later. Like, it just kind of reminded me of potential. Like, this is a cute little town. We're on an adventure. Everything's great. But, like, it just kind of, like I said, just kind of every now and then with a melody or a chord change or something just kind of reminded you that maybe it's not all okay. And, like I said, I don't know if anything overtly terrible happens in this town later in the game, but, like, it being, as you say, not exactly the place you start, like, I think that's an interesting observation that the music itself allows for the fact that, this is a nice, cute place and it's safe, but at the same time, we have left and we're starting the journey. Things could go wrong. There is potential there. So it's like, that's what I noticed most about it, was like just a little reminder that things sometimes go wrong on adventures.
Yeah, I suppose so. I don't want to. Well, I'll just spoil a little bit. I don't recall that anything too terrible happened specifically in that town. The sort of dramatic action happens elsewhere in the world, but yeah. So, but in any case, let's go ahead and move on to my second pick. Let's see. This is Underwater. Now, I don't remember if there were any. I don't think there were much, if any, underwater segments in the first game. This one does have them. There are parts where you literally go underwater. It's not just going on the water like on Lapras, which I think the first game had. This one, you actually submerge yourself and you explore underwater, just like a lot like you would above. So much so that you can't take Pokemon from one to the other. They're kind of separate environments. And I think the music kind of reflects that, because, we talk sometimes about, music related to water, like beach music and stuff like that. This is a little bit different. I put down it has a bit of a buoyancy quality to it, which I guess is a little hard to describe musically. But, I felt like like it really did give the impression of being underwater as opposed to, like I said, on the beach or on the dock or something like that. And did you have any thoughts in that area?
Yeah, I really like the word you used, buoyancy. Like I love that there's this little moment where it's kind of just like a at the end of phrases it'll sometimes do a little like do 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 like there's a lot of up and down quality to this music that just kind of, as you say, gives a sense of waves of floating and just kind of being moved along by the current. And like it's just a very sweet and smooth track that, as you say, like perfectly captures the feeling of being underwater versus just, being in around the water. And I also really love that this is another song that definitely has like a part one, a part two, a part three. Like it's sweet and wonderful at the beginning, but like somewhere in the middle, it kind of almost like movements in a symphony or something moves into a bit of a minor key, and like maybe something nefarious could happen in this water, so maybe there's danger, and then it goes into a third part that's like a little different still. So another track that kind of serves multiple emotions, multiple facets of the story.
Yeah, it definitely has some jazzy elements, more so than, a lot of the other stuff, which he said is very marching band. This one definitely feels a bit more like a lounge or a club type song with, like I said, those underwater elements. One point of comparison I wanted to make, even though stylistically they are very different, compositionally they are very different, but they serve a similar purpose. One of the all-time great underwater stage themes, Aquatic Ambience from Donkey Kong Country. Even though these compositionally are quite different and instrumentally are quite different, there's something, I don't know exactly what it is, but there's something similar about them. Like I said, not derived from each other, but you can kind of tell they fill the same niche. And that was one thing that kind of struck me there. And any response to that part?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not recalling Donkey Kong, the soundtrack, so I'll have to take your word on for that. But I think I would say I agree. The parts I can speak to.
Yeah, that might have come to mind also in part because I got to meet David Wise earlier this year, which was a big deal for me as, one of the great video game music composers out there. So, but in any event, the next track is also one of my picks. Like I said, we try to go roughly in play order. So Empoleon Ride is one that you get to hear when you get to sort of an ice type area in the game, and basically there are Pokemon that you can effectively kind of ride on at various points in the game to traverse certain types of stuff. There's some where you can get on a river, there's some where you can get on lava, and in this particular case you get on an Empoleon, and in addition to letting you navigate freezing waters, it actually lets you like smash through small icebergs and stuff like that to get to your destination. But as far as the music itself, the instrumentation is very much in keeping with the rest of the game, but the music itself has very much a gliding quality to it. And I think it also uses, some bells and marimba. So it's definitely like percussion type or bell type instruments, which are not uncommon in that sort of march stuff there, but it's used a bit differently. And what did you sort of notice here?
Yeah, I put down like it's just got a sense of fun and wonder, but mostly movement. Like I can feel movement through this track, so it's like got that sense of energy that like you picture that you are in fact riding on a Pokemon. You're going through an environment, and I kind of found that kind of be impressive.
Yeah, the movement. Yeah, the word movement is actually pretty appropriate because there are times where you have to actually build up momentum while you're on Empoleon so that you can slice through multiple little pieces of ice through the currents to get to where you're getting to. So that's, like I said, the music follows the gameplay there, which is one of the things I really like about this one. Also, it's just kind of a neat little, it's not a complete departure from the other music in that area, but it plays nicely, I guess is the best way. I think I kind of wish I had a few more words to describe this. But it's definitely a standout for me, just the way it sort of integrates with the gameplay and the way it meshes with it. And did you have anything else to say about this one?
I think that's it for me.
All right, well, let's move on to Anne. Let's go to your third pick, which is The Incredible Machine. So I don't want to give out too much, but basically towards the end of the game, when you get to the sort of the final conflict there, the evil organization switches on this machine and it makes this noise. There's really sort of like a couple different phases to it. But Anne, you picked this one out. I can see, I can tell part of the reason it grabbed your attention. It's definitely got an identity to it. But why don't you tell us what you heard there? I guess.
All right, yeah. So this track, it to be fair, it's less of a song and more of sound effects. But what I found so striking about it is kind of the panning quality. So it's like almost a distortion-y, like a lot of rising, falling sounds that are less music and again just more of a sound effect. But they pan from right to left in a way that's incredibly unsettling and very cool. I really found that striking, and I thought as far as music for this game goes, as Steven says, it has its own identity. Like this is a track that, excuse me, perfectly fits the room it's in, the moment it's made for. I've not gotten to that part yet in the game, but like I can feel the tension and again, just that it has that very interesting panning effect, I think makes it stand out a lot on this soundtrack.
Yeah, that's interesting. Sorry, that I don't want to. I hope that didn't sound dismissive, but I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, I'd say it definitely works there, and as you mentioned, it's sort of there's actually kind of like two phases of it as the machine gets turned up at a certain point. But as far as sort of like the non-musical aspects of it, that actually kind of reminds me of some of the stuff from like. Especially like Earthbound Mother 2. And you remember earlier we said that one of the folks on this game had worked on sort of the discarded N64 version of Mother 3, which I guess would have been Earthbound 2 had it come out here. So I did kind of want to point out that similarity. It's about as close as Pokemon musically, or at least this game gets to sort of some of the more oddball stuff in the Mother/Earthbound series, but there is that little connection there, and I thought that was kind of interesting.
I'm always surprised that every now and then, like, whether we're talking about Pokemon music and the video games or the anime or like the Earthbound Mother series just keeps creeping in there, just reminding everybody that there's a connection, that some people worked on both these projects.
Yeah. So, and obviously, although he isn't credited in a musical capacity, Hip Tanaka also has a connection to that series, so that might explain some of this as well. This is a Creatures developed game, so. All right, well, we've sort of talked about, well, so let me see, let's see overall, okay. All right, well, there's definitely other stuff we could have talked about. There's a fair number of other locations we didn't get to. Please do feel free to mention any of the ones that are your favorites. But in any case, let's sort of give our overall sort of opinion on the music in this game. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, it sort of expands on the first Ranger game. It's very much in line with that. I wouldn't say, I do think overall this is probably a better soundtrack than the first one. The first one wasn't horrible or anything. It was perhaps one of the best things about that game. Excuse me. But this one seems like a good successor. It's probably not on the level, at least for me, as something like a mystery dungeon from this era, but it does, I think, work very well and does some things very well. And what was sort of your overall opinion or take on this game's music?
I would agree with that. Like it feels very like Pokemon. Like there's a style of composing to it that feels very much in the vein of the main series games even a little bit. And it just like that call to adventure, but it's got a lot of uniqueness to it as well, which I really appreciate. And I think I would agree that I'm mildly more positive about this one than the previous Rangers game, that there's like a lot of, I don't know, just a lot of new things and a lot of expansion on musical ideas and locations and the like, in a musical sense to keep it interesting.
All right. Well, if you had any thoughts on the music of this game you wanted us to sort of talk about, you can always drop us a line, pokepress@gmail.com. You can always leave a comment on one of these videos, or you can look us up on Twitter at pokepress. And speaking of feedback, I do have a little bit of that to go over. So let me just punch that up and we'll certainly talk about it. All right. Well, speaking of feedback, this is a comment I got recently on one of my older videos. It's actually from about a decade ago. Blu-ray review Pokemon collection. So, like I said, this is from about 2012 or so, and basically, this was a Blu-ray set. It was one disc, but it had 4 movies on it. The 4 Miramax movies. So that's, let's see, Pokemon Forever, Heroes, Jirachi, and Deoxys are all on there. This is a sort of a follow-up to a 5/7 Blu-ray they released a year or two earlier. But in any case, we get comments on this every so often because these movies are always in kind of a weird state of limbo. But from Kuka's Nerdy Corner, hopefully I said that about right, said he just recently bought this set for $70 US. Yeah, this has been out of print for quite some time and goes for a decent price on the used market. And he sort of says it's a shame Miramax hasn't released any of these movies again on Blu-ray, and he's surprised they still hold the rights. So I sort of semi-corrected that. I mean, Miramax, I don't know exactly how it all got split up at some point, but as far as the Pokemon movies, it seems like Paramount has inherited the rights through some sort of buyout or whatever. And in fact, they do have them digitally, at least some of them, on different services. Like I know Deoxys is on, you can buy it on Amazon. I'm not sure. I don't have Paramount Plus, so I can't tell you if any of them are on there. I wouldn't be surprised if they are or were or will be at some point. But let's see. This individual got back to me and said, yeah, he seems to pick up a lot of the German ones, the Blu-rays, which also happen to have the English dub, it seems. And he kind of asked why they didn't have that. And they told him, yeah, someone else has the rights to those 4. So those, like I said, they're in a bit of an odd state, at least for now. I think for some reason, unlike some of the other ones, Pokemon, I think their goal kind of is to buy back the distribution rights so that they can unify them for all the animated films on their end, more or less. And these ones, they haven't really gotten around to that. Like I said, we get comments on these because some of I know Destiny Deoxys and some of the other ones are definitely up there in a lot of folks' lists of their favorite movies, and it's very frustrating to them to not have a good way to pick up a copy of these other than waiting for, the DVD set that occasionally seems to get re-released or something of that nature. They'd like these to be a little easier to get a hold of. I don't know, Anne, that was a whole mouthful. What do you have some things to add?
I mean, I don't know if I have much to add. Mostly just like the more I learn about music distribution, the more I become aware of things like sound recordings, which just don't just apply to music, which can also apply to just the spoken word in movies. And like it's just amazing how complicated these situations can be of movies exchanging rights and getting dubbed and getting released in certain places but not others. It's like I'm always just amazed at something that in my brain feels like it should be so simple becomes so complicated, but good on you for managing to get your hands on the set. Like, I applaud you. I hope someday they are able to get a little bit more easily available in many different countries and in many different languages.
Yeah, like I said, at least the English versions, some of them I think you can buy through YouTube and other platforms. It does seem to be somewhat of a weird arrangement, and I'm not sure why it's so complicated at the moment. If they're just testing the waters for, I don't know, it's been a while at least. So yeah, something to keep your eyes on and see how that changes over time.
Yeah, I know, like, in the past I've sometimes like sold parts of my, collection of DVDs over the years because, we don't need as many for, within a streaming world, and I need cash and things like that. But it's like those four, it's like I'm never letting them go because I may never get them back.
Yeah, I kind of know how you feel about that. So, as someone who owns both of the 5.7 and the 4.5.6.7 Miramax Blu-ray compilations, as well as I believe I'm pretty sure I have all four of them on DVD around here somewhere, because the shorts aren't included on these Blu-rays either for like the first three that have them. So that's another whole dimension to this. But yeah, so complex scenario. Hopefully it gets better at some point, but yeah. And it's, like I said, just as a reminder, if you have any thoughts on this discussion or any of our discussions, go ahead and feel free to give us a comment, pokepress@gmail.com, at pokepress on Twitter, or a comment on one of our videos, just like this individual did a few weeks ago. All right, so we do these discussions in American or North American release order. And the next one on our list is Pokémon Rumble. So you may remember that in our last discussion we talked about My Pokémon Ranch. And, they created a bunch of Pokémon models for that. And the same folks, Umbrella, a year or two later, wound up making this game, Pokémon Rumble, that used those Pokémon models as little... Let me rephrase that. So our next discussion is Pokémon Rumble. This is kind of like My Pokémon Ranch. It's another WiiWare title. Although this one is much more gamey. It does use some of the same, pretty much the same Pokémon models as My Pokémon Ranch did, but this one is very much a sort of arena combat type of deal, gameplay-wise. And it's, Umbrella, they obviously kind of ceased to exist a few years ago, but this sub-series Rumble would be their existence for the rest of their... But this sub-series Rumble would be their output for the rest of their existence. So this is kind of what they're more or less known for, and so on. But I don't know. Anne, did you play this game when it originally came out, or?
Like, it looks mildly familiar. I think it's one of those that I may have watched somebody play at a convention. Again, we're kind of in the era where I don't own a lot of these games, so. But it definitely, like, it looks a little bit familiar, so I feel like I may have watched somebody play. I may have to do some research on it or try to see if I can find a copy or of my own before the next episode recording.
Well, like I said, it's a WiiWare title, so if you can't find it downloaded, you won't be able to find this one too easily. Although some of the other iterations, at least one of them was released on cartridge somewhere. I think one of the 3DS versions was released on cartridge somewhere. So
okay.
The games have some differences and some new content and some tweaks each time, but the core gameplay is still pretty similar with each one. But yeah, that's going to be our next discussion. But until then, Anne, thank you very much for being on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, folks, thanks. All right, we'll leave a little bit of a pause here, and then we'll do our game discussion.
Right.
So, yeah, let's see. So we'll sort of talk about a couple comments on here. Let's see, we got Yeah, we do have Deflin says, "Oh dang, that's pricey." Yeah, because it's out of print and stuff. And it's the best quality those movies pretty much have ever been released in. It's not hard to see why those would be so expensive. At least the English versions of those movies.
It still like shocks me because I remember there was a period where that 4 DVD release was like in the $5 bin at Walmart.
Yeah, the DVD versions have do get recycled every so often, and those aren't usually too expensive.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on the year and where you live, I guess.
Yeah, so yeah, but yeah, there's yeah, I do hope that there'll be more. Like I said, it's also probably one of those cases where, like, even excluding like Japan, the rights in different countries and different parts of the world, whereas like for the first couple, it was all pretty much done through Warner Brothers, and then for the later ones, I think the Pokemon Company sort of took the lead there, especially once they took over the dubbing. They sort of took over the overseeing the rights and trying to keep them all. Obviously, the one little exception to that is obviously like Detective Pikachu, the movie, which is a Warner Brothers, film, at least for the foreseeable future. So that's a little bit different, but like I said, so yeah, these things tend to get kind of complicated and stuff like that. All right, well, we'll leave a little pause here, and then we'll do our game discussion. Let me punch my notes back up, because I do have a number of things to say about the game itself.
Close some of my 500 tabs that I've got open here.
Yeah, I try to minimize that, especially since I'm the one presenting, to make sure I don't have extra tabs open in my browser when we do these things, just to keep things a little bit cleaner, or even like folder windows and stuff. Try to keep the minimal amount of stuff going.
Yeah, no, I usually have it like written on a tablet or like an actual notebook, like I do today. But it's like this, for some reason, this one just tab after tab after tab of information. Which is surprising because it's been like a bit of a shorter episode. I don't know what all those tabs were for now.
Yeah, all right. Well, leave a little pause, and then I'll do my introduction of the game portion. Okay, well, we obviously had plenty to talk about with the music of Shadows of Almia, but we definitely want to talk about the game itself. Now, this is, again, the second Pokémon Ranger game, and they made a number of mechanical changes from the first one. The first one, like I said, that we talked about it last year, and we were pretty harsh on it mechanically. Sort of the main difference between the two games is in the first game, in order to catch a Pokemon, you have to make consecutive circles around it a certain number without lifting up your stylus. And that's the only way to catch it. In this one, they use sort of an HP-based system, whereas you circle it, you wouldn't call it damage, isn't quite the right word, but you sort of build up a bar, and when it fills up, you catch the Pokemon. Now, if you stop making circles, it will start to go down again, and you'll lose some of your progress. So that's sort of the balancing act they have there. Now, Anne, you didn't play this back then, but you did pick this up just recently for this sort of retrospective. I assume you noticed that quite quickly.
Yeah, like I don't believe I don't believe I ever owned Ranger, but like I believe the little dabbles of the first game that I played, like I remember being kind of frustrated because I am not a gamer, and that like having to like draw a perfect circle without ever picking up your stylus, like that sucked. But I remember, but this time around, like it just was so much easier and so much more forgiving. And I would not say I'm still like any good at this game, but it is much more user friendly to be able to try to catch the Pokemon and not necessarily have to draw a perfect circle that never lifts up, never changes its pressure.
Yeah, well, it doesn't have to be a perfectly round circle or anything like that, but it's not that picky in the first game. But it definitely, but I would say, actually, although you can argue that it becomes easier in the second game, which I think was kind of the point. Too easy for some folks. I did see one or two reviews that were kind of, I don't know if dismissive is quite the word, but surprised it was changed in that way, since they seem to have gone along with the first game quite well. But I really think actually changing the mechanics the way they did opens up a lot of things. You can do more stuff there. Like you can use assists from the various Pokemon much more easily and in much more interesting ways. And it gives the things more of a structure and more of a feel to them. If you wanted, we did have boss battles in the first game, but because, it was always the do this many circles, it was, you didn't have like an ebb and flow to them. It's just you either got the circles or you didn't, and you had to kind of start over. Yes, they may have had moves they switched between, but it was sort of just, I don't know, the dynamics were just so very different. And I think changing the capture mechanics, like I said, not only did it make the game more accessible and arguably easier, but I think it made it a mechanically more deep game. And do you think that's a fair assessment?
I do. Like, I definitely feel like I'm involved in a way that, like, again, it's hard to remember back to the bits I played of the first game, but like in reviewing the Let's Plays of the first game that I watched to prepare for it, like I definitely feel like this is a game that I'm actually playing and making decisions about and being involved in rather than like trying to focus so hard on this one mechanical aspect of it. So I think you're right. I think it as you say, just kind of opened up some of the gameplay.
Yeah. As far as some of the other mechanics, like, did you enjoy being able to ride on Pokemon? There's more of that in the third game. They really take it to the next level there. But in this one, you can sort of catch certain Pokemon and use them to go on rivers or lava or stuff like that. Did that feel like a nice addition?
I did. I like the opportunity to be able to use the Pokemon to kind of interact with the environment. I enjoy that aspect of the main series games too. So yeah, no, I felt that that was a good touch.
All right. Well, talking about the game's structure a little bit. Now, the game does actually start you out at a ranger school, which you might have thought would have been in the first ranger game, but they just kind of, well, you've been drafted or whatever, or you sent a letter and you got accepted or whatever. This one seems to have a bit more of an actual, like, learning architecture. And it's always a little, when they have a school at the beginning of a game, um, that can seem a little bit, I don't know if pandering is the right word. I don't know. I just have a lot of thoughts about that. Like, were they sort of rebooting this, doing a soft reboot of the series that way, or things of that nature? I don't know. Anne, what are your kind of thoughts?
It's hard to say what they were thinking, but I definitely think it's a good choice. I like the idea of starting out in the school and kind of getting all your tutorials in kind of that way. And I just love that kind of first opening joke where it's like you show up at the school and they're like, haha, we're team school, we're the bad guys. And you find out later they're just kind of having a joke at your expense. But like, I don't know. There was just something very cute about it. Kind of just interacting with all the students and kind of going through like, this is a stylus, this what is it does, this is how you capture a Pokemon, this is your teacher, are you a boy or a girl, is he a boy or a girl, like all those other things. Like it just being set in a school environment, like in some ways felt, as you say, a little pandering, a little cheesy and cliche, but in other ways like it fit, like that was just the natural place to have your tutorial, your starting point. So I liked it. I thought it was a good choice.
Yeah, it just because it's the second game in the sub-series, it's sort of a weird thing there that it could come across as, especially if they hadn't changed so many mechanics, it could come off as insulting to some of the people who had played the first game. But they do weave a little bit of story stuff in there to keep it from being completely tutorial and nothing else. So that's at least kind of nice. But I did want to kind of point that out. I mean, there are a lot of games that do start in a school. It's just a little unusual for it to be in the second game in the series that's not like a reboot or anything like that. So, speaking of some other structural elements, one thing they added here is a quest system. And, the way this works is basically on the overworld, you'll see someone who has a little cartoon speech or thought bubble above their head, and you can talk to them, and they'll give you some tasks to do. And when you complete that task, first of all, there's a little bit of a mini story that plays out, and also you get some sort of bonus for it. In your current playthrough you've been going through, and have you been doing a lot of those? Or have you been saving them for later? Or how's that worked out for you?
I've been doing some of them, and it's a mechanic that like appears in a lot of other games that I've played, and I'm kind of the type that I want to do every side quest. So I imagine I will do every single one of them eventually. But yeah, I've done a few. I've, kind of gone to the beach and investigated a cave and Like a lot of just little different little side quests. I'm not sure how many of them are side quests and how many of them I have to finish to get to the end, but yeah, like I've enjoyed that. And I think the making some of them maybe a little bit optional, or like you can choose when you want to get around to it. I've always liked that mechanic in games, that you're not always kind of railroaded from one thing to the other. You can kind of make your own choices about in what order you do things, or if you do some things at all. So I like that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think technically speaking, all the quests are optional, but you learn some things about some of the characters, including some of the not the main characters, but some of the important characters in the game and stuff like that. If you do those quests and stuff, and definitely if it's your first time through, you maybe don't need to do every single one of them, but I recommend picking out at least a couple, because you do get some good bonuses there, like defense against certain types, extra features for your stylus. And other stuff like that. So there are some definite bonuses you can get that way.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, a lot like not only a main series Pokemon game, but also the first Ranger game. This game has an evil team, which is Team Dim Sun. And I'm almost a little surprised you did not pick out one of their battle themes for one of your songs there. But I was wondering, did you have any thoughts on the team as a whole, or the organization, or some of its leaders or stuff?
I mean, like, they do have some good musical themes. I kept reading it as Team Dim Sun, which, like, I kept trying to figure out, like, oh, are all of their names related to food or something? No, they're not. They're a lot more sinister, it turns out. But yeah, like, I just find them an interesting team. I find Heath kind of interesting. I really like what's the name of the de facto leader of that team?
I know there's Weezer, but I don't know.
The snarky guy.
Yeah, I forget.
In the group.
Yeah, I don't. That's not who that is. But spoiler alert! I think you've probably figured this out yourself. But some of the folks in the Ultru company are kind of in cahoots with Team Dim Sun, so not the biggest surprise. I won't try and spoil the rest of it, because there is some interesting character stuff that you probably haven't gotten to yet. But
yeah, no, I'm okay. Then maybe I'll stop talking before I spoil myself. But.
Yeah,
but
so
I do rather find this team interesting. I'm not sure I fully understand their goal yet, because, like I said, I'm kind of in the middle of spoiling myself while also trying to play through. So,
yeah, I'll try not to reveal too much about the ending of the game. I figured you would probably figure it out on your own. There was some sort of connection between that big business conglomerate oil company and the evil team. It just makes too much sense, but I won't go much further than that.
Right.
But you mentioned Heath, so I don't want to make too much fun of this character or anything like that, but basically about 3/4 of the way through the game or whatever, you start getting voicemail messages from this person who seems to be impersonating another ranger, and is speaking in some very, I mean, there's not really a great way to say it, broken English, at least in the English version. And good on you. I did ask you to do some research about this character and how they're presented in other versions of the game and stuff like that. Do you want to go ahead and elaborate?
Yeah, so the conceit of the character Heath is that he is not from Almia. He is from somewhere else. Very much like Fantina in the anime. They are from some other nation within the Pokemon world that does not speak the same language that necessarily Ash and company all speak. That different even from maybe some of the local dialects of Alola and Unova. So to kind of so he speaks in broken English in the English dub, and in many of the other dubs as well, they speak kind of just a broken version of their language to kind of imply that this person is, speaking a second language. They are from originally somewhere else. In the Japanese version, he actually has a Tohoku-esque dialect, which is a region of Japan. It's y'all remember in 2011, I believe it was, when the big earthquake and nuclear disaster happened in Japan. That's the area this is from, and it's kind of like the stereotypical like rural country bumpkin kind of dialect is the best U.S. Comparison I can draw. Like, it's just, you hear it and you're like, oh yeah, that's rural. And the northest part of Tohoku, kind of, the dialect can be so different from the mainstream, proper Tokyo dialect, that they like sometimes air broadcasts from Tohoku with subtitles. It's very much like the Okinawan dialect in that way. It's just like it's kind of just managed to diverge enough that mainstream people may not fully understand what was saying. And like one example I have that kind of came out of that the tsunami disaster is that like they had some slogans in Tohoku for the rebuilding that said "ganbatte" with a P rather than like "ganbare" or "gambatte" or whatever. Like that's the best, like the best examples I can find. It's like they'll often end their grammatical function with "daio," "dappe." I think Heath actually refers to himself as ora rather than ore. Like little things like that, like, again, it's still Japanese, but like they've gone through a lot of trouble to kind of give him a dialect and an accent that Japanese people would recognize, like, he is from somewhere else than all these other characters. And the Pokemon world is often divided into regions that are like reflective of different parts of Japan and the rest of the world. So ergo, Heath is from some other country, not originally from Almia.
Okay, I kind of wonder what they did in that version, if they had tried to make him sound like a Japanese, like in the Japanese version they made him sound like he had an American accent trying to pronounce Japanese, but that's not apparently what they did. I'm trying to think what the U.S. equivalent is, and it might not have worked out very well for. Might have made the thing look bad, so I can kind of see why they may have gone in a different direction with the translated versions. Although it's not uncommon for like other languages, like I assume you looked at like the French version and a few others, and it's not uncommon for those to be based on the English version like that. So it's quite possible, but yeah. So, certainly, if you did that the wrong way, you could get in, I guess, some trouble for it. Not sure how Japan would, or that region of Japan would sort of perceive this type of thing in their version. But yeah, I just kind of want to point that out.
Yeah, in comparing, like, doing the same thing with one of the accents, like, native to within America, like, it's kind of, I think it's kind of an interesting choice in that, like, I'm always surprised when I watch anime and, like, live-action Japanese television at how rarely they actually do accents from other countries. I don't know if that's a cultural thing or what, but again, with an American accent, like there are many, as you and I know, there are many accents within America that denote different places. But I think as a society, we're coded to feel that like a Hawaiian accent, a Southern accent, like they evoke different things in us, but they're still American. They're still from the same country. And I think with Pokemon, not that Japanese people would think Tohoku people aren't really Japanese, but because they've separated a region, they have a region called Kanto based on an actual region called Kanto, and a region called Johto based on Kansai, where everyone speaks like the Kansai dialect. I think by having a character with an accent that is still Japanese, but a different region in Japan, I think that communicates to the audience very quickly. Again, the idea that this person is from another region, but because in America we don't have necessarily, or we didn't at the time, have a Pokemon region based on Texas and another Pokemon region based off like Arizona, I think that translation is not the same for us, or wasn't the same for us at the time. So to convey that same sense of being from another place, I think we had to go with like, this person speaks a different language. He speaks a different English.
Yeah, like I said, though, I just kind of wanted to point that out because I was just really curious what they did in other versions of it, because this is definitely one of those things that's kind of a potential minefield if you handle it the wrong way. We'll kind of just leave it there.
For sure.
But I'm sure most of our listeners can think of some things that, had they tried to translate it this way and say the English version, would have worked out very poorly from a PR perspective.
Mm-mm.
All right, well, I guess sort of, going through this game and stuff like that, and having revisited the first Ranger game, I kind of wanted to ask, from like a quality perspective, do you feel like this is what the first Ranger game mechanically and stuff should have been? I mean, that's sort of the conclusion I came to, so much so that like I didn't realize some of the more common themes, like the battle theme and some of the other stuff, were all new, because this is, well, maybe I didn't put that out, maybe I didn't say that super well or stuff like that super clearly. But do you kind of get what I'm saying? Like, this is like, maybe the first game was a bit of a rush job and a bit of a needed more time in the oven or stuff like that. I don't know, Anne, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't want to knock the first one too hard, because there are many people who enjoyed it, and as you say, you've had a couple comments of people who apparently were very successful with the original game mechanics. But for my part, like, this feels like the game, like, this feels like a better, like a second draft. And if I were to introduce somebody to this series, I think I would give them this game first. And like, not like I said, I don't necessarily want to wipe the first game off the planet, because there was a lot of good there. I don't want to erase it and say, like, don't play it at all or just skip over it. But I do feel like, for me, as evidenced just by the fact that I am still playing this one that I picked up for this podcast, and I played a little bit of the first Rangers of Altamont and then just ultimately never played it again, and have never picked it up since. This is the one I think is a better introduction for most people to the series, I think.
Yeah, I think there's kind of a similar thing with some of the Pokemon movies, because I think some folks say that, at least I've sometimes thought that maybe I want people to start actually with like the second Pokemon movie, Pokemon 2000, if they're not terribly familiar with it, because the first one, like, there are some legitimately great things about Mewtwo Strikes Back, but there are also some serious rough edges, and the second movie has a lot less of those. I think we might be in kind of a similar situation here, although I think pretty much like everything about this second game is more or less better. I mean, they're not totally, I don't know, it's not a perfect comparison or anything like that, but I feel like there are some definite similarities.
That's a really interesting comparison to make, and I kind of like that. But again, there's a lot of good things in the first game, but some serious rough edges.
Yeah, and maybe that's a little bit of a different thing in a video game, where those rough edges you encounter directly through gameplay versus just having to watch a movie or listen to, music or something like that. So maybe that gives it a different quality there. But I did want to kind of point that out. All right, well, I did have one more thing on there, but since you haven't finished the game, I was going to compare All True Inc. to a certain real-world oil company that got into a lot of trouble about a year after this game came out.
Oh my.
But I guess we'll have to leave that for some other time when you've come through there. But let's see.
I mean, if you really want to spill the tea, like...
No, that's okay. I'll let you discover that on your own.
Okay,
but
okay.
yeah, so there's some interesting stuff that maybe we'll do in a future discussion. But like, overall, I mean, I wouldn't put this in terms of like improved sequels. I wouldn't put this in the same tier as like the ultimate thing in there is like Street Fighter 2 is like the most improved video game sequel of all time to a lot of folks. Just because the first one is sort of a footnote at this point, because the second one just made so many things better and was such a cultural impact that a lot of people like weren't familiar with the first Street Fighter. this isn't maybe quite on that level, but I do think this is a much improved game, and a game I would much rather play and go back to than the first one. It also seems to have a fair bit more, at least somewhat more content. Not that the first one was super short, but it's just, this one just feels more substantial in a lot of ways.
I would agree with that.
Okay, I think that's a good note to end on, so let's go ahead and stop our recordings. All right, well, thank you to everyone who tuned in, whether you're watching this live or on replay. We always appreciate that. Also appreciate those comments and stuff like that. Like I said, if you have any comments on this, we are certainly willing to bring it into a future discussion. As far as our next one of these, August is looking to be a little bit busy for me, so I don't think I'll be able to record another one of these until after Worlds, regardless of what I end up doing or not doing there, because of some of the stuff that, some of the situation. But yeah, certainly look forward to that. Like I said, Pokemon Rumble is an interesting topic that I've wanted to get to for a while, so both musically and otherwise, since it is effectively, although they did it about 4 or 5 times, the last thing Umbrella did as a company before being brought into Creatures, I believe it was. All right, well, thank you very much, folks. Like I said, really always appreciate that. 1 second here. Trying to get there's the mouse cursor. But always do appreciate that. All right, Anne, anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, but thank you everybody for joining us.
All right, folks. Thanks.